Hi, I'm Ginger Zee, and it's not too late. Here are the environmental headlines that you might have missed this week. Burger King is changing its menu. You can now get a less gassy Whopper. This is not a promise of what it's going to do for your digestion, but a promise that the cows that your Whopper come from will be less gassy, and therefore they'll have less of a carbon footprint. See, livestock makes up 14.5% of all human-induced greenhouse gas emissions, and 41% of those come from the meat that we eat. So Burger King plans to change their cow's diet to produce less methane. They also have an Impossible Whopper, so it's really up to you. Now to another, even larger animal, the whale. And don't worry, this is not about gassy whales. But this type of whale, the northern right whale, it was just added to the International Endangered Species list. There are only about 400 of these beasts left on the planet. A lot of groups are blaming warmer water, which sent the whale's food north, straight into shipping lanes. Now let's go ahead and get into the animal that we all need to learn a lot more about today, the wild horse, or Mustang. After I posted my first It's Not Too Late, I got a message asking me to look into the BLM. Not Black Lives Matter, but the Bureau of Land Management. I hadn't heard much about that group, so in the message, this woman claims that the BLM are, quote, imprisoning and killing our wild horses. I'm sorry, what? Hold on. Here's what we found. The BLM is part of the U.S. Department of Interior. They are the part that is responsible for the care and protection of more than 245 million acres, a lot of it out here, the public lands in the West. That's an eighth of our nation, and they do a lot. But it's this part of their job that has folks talking horse murder. Yes, that is a helicopter chasing and herding wild horses so that they can put them in a holding facility, potentially for the rest of their lives. I'm sorry, what? Let's go back a little bit. We all have to understand this better. See, Harry Truman, back in the 1940s, started the BLM, and their mission was to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the public lands for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. That makes sense. Then in the 1950s, this lady, Velma B. Johnson, later known as Wild Horse Annie, led the charge against Mustangers. A Mustanger is a person who harvested wild horses. Yeah, that means killed them, mostly for pet food. Wild Horse Annie was not a fan of the old Mustang murder, so she pushed for an actual law to protect them. And she got it. The Wild Horse Annie Act. It made it illegal to kill Mustangs while using a motorized vehicle. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. And with humans taking over the land and then more Mustanging happening, the number of wild horses got down to 25,300. People were worried that they'd be endangered. So in 1971, Congress unanimously passed the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act. A side note, for those of you who are not cowboys, a burro, it's a donkey. This 1971 law then put the BLM in charge of managing and protecting the horses and donkeys, and they did it. But they say it went almost too well. See, by the 1980s, there were just over 60,000 wild horses and burros, and that was too many, according to the BLM. So, to protect the land and other wildlife from the wild horses, they started rounding them up using helicopters and water traps. A lot of people see a horse being rounded up and they say, why can't we just let nature be nature?
If you just let nature be nature, the horses run out of range. They sometimes run out of water even. And what we're left with is a very inhumane situation where we're not adequately managing these animals, and they face starvation and death.
Today, the BLM estimates that there are 95,000 wild horses on public land, and that is way more than they want. But the number that we do get to is that target number, the AML. Can you tell me what AML is and how we get that number?
Sure, AML is the appropriate management level. Right now, the appropriate management level is 27,000 horses and burros.
Okay, so you got 95,000 horses, but you want to get to 27,000. That means you have to figure out what to do with 68,000 horses.
And the reason that the bill was passed was because they felt that number was so low that the populations were endangered. Now the BLM wants to bring the number back down to that original 20,000, and that just doesn't make sense.
Most of the groups who are critical of the BLM say that the BLM cares more about cattle than they do about horses. Even though some have blamed wild horses for damage to BLM lands, a 2017 report from the Government Accountability Office says they need to study whether it was wild horses or the ranchers' livestock who are ruining the land. Either way, there's another point of contention. What happens to the horses after they're gathered? Well, they go into a holding facility like this, and right now there are about 50,000 of them in captivity. Each horse is costing you, the taxpayer, $23,000 over its lifetime. The BLM knows that this is a problem. Since 2012, they've spent nearly $390 million holding horses. Now, concerns about overpopulation became so bad that the administration proposed lifting bans on horse slaughter in 2018. You can imagine that didn't go over well. Their only outlet really has been adoption.
What we've done is offered $1,000 to help offset the cost of adopting a horse and burro. Last fiscal year, we were able to increase our adoptions by over 50%, merely by through our adoption incentive program.
The BLM says that 7,100 adoptions last year saved taxpayers about $170 million. Some BLM critics say that the adoptions are not regulated well enough, though, and those adoptions end in mass slaughter, like the case proved in 2007 when 1,700 horses were adopted out by one guy in Colorado, then they were brought to Mexico and killed.
It is not an ideal system that is in place right now, for sure. And this is the hard part about thinking, how do we get in the future to a point where that's not happening?
BLM just got $21 million on top of their regular funding from Congress, and they say they are going to be aggressive and attack specific HMAs. That's the herd management areas. There are certain ones that need more help than others, and they're going to do it with immediate mass roundups.
This summer, and as well as removals of horses off the range, we'll also do aggressive fertilization treatments.
Now, critics say that they need to know that fertility treatments are being used as well, because mass roundups just aren't sustainable.
If that's all that is going to happen, that affects nothing. That will go round and round and round forever.
And in this study by the National Academies Press, they say roundups can actually increase the number of horses, because the biologic response of the horse when numbers go down is to procreate even more. Also, critics say that William Perry Penley, the President Trump's divisive nominee for director of the BLM, he's inflamed this delicate situation. Here's him speaking at a conference last year.
It's a tens of millions of dollars problem, but the more important thing for me as the manager of those lands is the existential threat to the quality of those lands.
It's been really terrible under the Trump administration, but it was bad under Obama, it was bad under Bush, and it was bad under Clinton. So, this is a culture that they have there. The answer to this situation is to use PZP birth control.
The BLM says that they will use fertility with the roundups because they have to.
Doing nothing is the very easiest thing you can do to avoid criticism and avoid the challenges, but we're not going to sit back and let this problem get worse.
Climate change has caused even more stress for the horses and for the land. More acres have been leased to oil and gas. There are more fences, less water, and really a tipping point for the living symbols of the historic and pioneer spirit of the West. Everybody agrees something has to be done, and the choices that we make now will determine if horses like these will live healthy and free for generations to come. I'm Ginger Zee, and I promise it's not too late.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.